Hi, my name is Blake Bettner, managing editor of Worn and Wound. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Magnus Walker.
Appreciate the introduction. Good to be here.
Welcome to New York.
Well, welcome to Brooklyn, right?
Welcome to Brooklyn, that's right. Yeah.
Do New Yorkers call Brooklyn New York, or is that just a Manhattan
I do.
thing?
I'm still a little new around here, so I'm not sure. I'm not clear on the rules here, but nobody's ever explained it to me.
What's the fifth borough, the one everyone forgets?
Yeah, what is that, Staten Island?
Staten Island, that's my
right.
favorite.
Yeah, that's your favorite,
Yeah.
okay.
And then Jersey City, that's like the unofficial sixth borough.
The
of
unofficial
New York,
sixth
right?
borough. Magnus, what brings you to New York?
Time on my hands, basically, is what brings me to New York.
Sure,
New York in the springtime's a great place to be, so.
Yeah.
Loosely, the New York Auto Show
Got it,
brings me to New York, but that's not really the main
That's right.
impetus.
You are into cars, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm into a lot of things.
You're into a lot of
Cars
things.
is one of them, yeah.
Okay, I know you've had a very prolific career defined by, well, I guess following your gut feeling wherever you end up.
Yeah, that's the TED Talk.
That's the TED Talk.
That's the TED Talk, yeah.
Yeah.
You got to do what you love. That's what I say. You know, whether it's surfing or playing around with watches or drinking coffee or being a ballerina, just follow your passion.
Ballerina, okay,
Yeah.
I like that. All right, you mentioned it, watches. We like talking about watches here. We generally start these things off with a wrist check. What do you have on your wrist?
Well, got to cue the drum roll right here. It's probably pretty obvious. It's going to be one of two things. But here's what's on my wrist right there.
Wow. Okay. So this is a Mark II Speedmaster with a racing dial. This is an older version, which I would expect nothing.
I'm all about vintage.
less.
You know, I literally, I like to collect multiples of the same thing because no two are different.
Multiples of the same thing.
Whether it's cars, guitars, shoes, watches is a perfect example.
Now, you've no doubt noticed that making new things that are inspired by vintage things has become a bit of a trend here. Do you think we're losing something? Like, when people look back in years from now at this era, what will define it?
Too early to tell. We're in what I call a disposable environment right now. And by that I mean, people love to throw things away. Nothing's built to last forever. Everyone's got a phone, right? I got a phone. Should probably turn it off right now, but too early to tell, But I like things with character. I like worn objects. Like I say, I like varieties of the same thing.
Yeah.
I literally have 3 of that same watch.
3 of the same watch.
Yeah.
I bet no dial is the same.
No dial's the same.
Yeah.
They all feel slightly different. That's sort of my go-to watch. I go in phases. I've got a few of those, like I say, and I've got a few Porsche Design watches. So I like to collect the same thing for some reason.
For some reason, that it becomes like a part of your identity. And you seem like obviously comfortable in your own style, and you've kind of defined your career in your taste. I feel like it's a tricky thing to do nowadays. There's a lot of other influences, outside influences affecting us. How do we go about finding, how somebody just getting into the space, finding their own taste, finding their own style, feeling comfortable in their own
The
skin?
problem with influences is they're easily influenced. So, I pay no attention to influences. Whatever it is I'm into, I personally chase things that I'm intrigued by. First of all, they got to have an interesting story, but I'm drawn to design. So whether it's industrial design, like on a watch, or functional design on a car, I'm drawn to things that look interesting to begin with. So that's my first approach on what am I into. It's things that somehow attract my attention. And that generally falls into the category of watches, guitars, cars. But I say humans like to collect, whether you're collecting stamps, trains, or whatever, right? I'm not reading journals and publications and blogs on what is trending. I've never done that. It's interesting, I say, a lot of times I'll use a comparison of guitars, cars, and watches, because you fall into a category, like generally loosely termed for me. If you're a watch guy, you pick a camp: Omega, Rolex; guitar guy, Gibson, Fender; car guy, Porsche, Ferrari. These are iconic brands with iconic items that people love to collect and discuss and break down which one's better than the other one. For me, it just comes to tactile feel. How does it feel on my wrist? Yeah. There was a time when I was chasing a certain watch. I was in love with it. I got to try it on. Then when I tried it on, I didn't like it. It was too big, too bulky, too heavy. So, it's all about tactile feel. How does it feel on your wrist and things like that.
Yeah. And make sure that you're setting yourself apart from, I see this a lot on my Instagram feed or other blogs, and being able to identify why you like it instead of why everybody else is saying this is a cool
I
thing.
don't particularly worry too much about what other people think about what I'm doing or what I should be collecting or what I shouldn't be doing. I tend not to dwell on any of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, am I interested in it? Does it look like something I want to own? Is it functional? You know, do I have to wind it up, not wind it up when it comes to watches? But I keep it real simple. Do I like it? Do I not like it? I don't overthink it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Less is more.
In terms of cars, I know that you know, something like the 924 versus like a 930, which has kind of come into vogue. You know, does that make any difference in how you think about? Well, I've been collecting these things for a while, and now all of a sudden they're all
good
these...
design never goes out of style.
Yeah.
You know, fashion trends come and go. Skinny jeans are in, bootlegs are in, flares are in, then they're out, then it's low rise, then it's high rise. So I always say good design never goes out of style. And back to I personally buy what I like to own, whether it's a guitar, a car, or a watch. And when it comes to Porsche specifically, you talk about 924 and 930. Two completely different cars.
Yeah.
When it comes to me with Porsche, I'm all about variety. And I break it down to front engine, mid-engine, rear engine, air and water cooled. So that covers everything Porsche's made. I've got a bunch of 924s and I got a bunch of 930s, and they all do the same thing completely differently. So it's back to variety. You know, and like you say, things become trendy because, you know, certain movements happen and people join in and drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not drinking Kool-Aid, I'm not serving the Kool-Aid. I've been fortunate enough to sort of be ahead of trends in a lot of different areas because I got into things like, I keep saying when I'm into them early, whether it was $500 Gibson SGs that are now 5 to 10 grand, or whether it was literally $500 924s that went a similar route.
Yeah.
So the thing with Porsche is, you know, I got them when they were affordable. I would always say Porsches were affordable compared to Ferraris and Lamborghinis and things like that. And specifically when it comes to Porsches and collecting, America is Porsche's largest global market. Porsche is celebrating its 75th anniversary. The epicenter of everything when it comes to Porsche really is California. Then you narrow it down to LA. I'm in LA. So my long rambling question here is, there are a lot of Porsches in LA. So there's a lot of variety. I've been into them for 45 years when they're really affordable.
Yeah.
And I've literally bought Porsches for $500. And you just go up from there. There's a price point for everything. Kind of like with watches.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
like, why is a Paul Newman Rolex Daytona astronomically valuable? I don't know. Probably because it's Paul Newman's, right?
He was a cool guy, right?
Paul Newman was the coolest of the cool. He did all the cool things.
All the cool things.
Yeah, he raced cars, he made films, he collected watches, he had a charity, he was a good human being, he was under the radar, you know, he lived in Connecticut, he raced at Lime Rock. He was a people's people, right? Relatable. Relatability is a big thing for me.
Relatability.
You know, down-to-earth people that can communicate verbally, visually, look you in the eye. They're not getting out the phone and texting.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about today's society is a bit more disposable. One of the challenges I see is people don't verbally communicate. They're too busy on the cell phone communicating that way. It's a different thing.
And I feel like this has adverse effects in how we experience these things. And I think guys like Newman, guys like yourself, a lot of what we try to be here is using these things, having the experiences with these things instead of just buying to collect these things. Obviously, you can have a lot of things, you can have a lot of variety, but still using them and having those experiences is an important thing. And obviously, very different from sharing that thing on social media or whatever it is. You know, I think, how do you find yourself like using and experiencing all of these things, even though you have a broad variety of them?
I put them on my wrist. I look at the time when I need to look at it. I don't take it off when I'm doing stuff. I don't worry about banging the case or scratching the bezel, and I don't lay it out on a table and over-curate it with a cigar and something next to it and take a photo of it with a Leica camera, and I don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I put it on my wrist, I forget to wind it up, I forget what time it is, I check the time, I wind it back up again. That's my involvement, that's my experience with it. I find it interesting how people are drawn to watches. My father was a watch guy. He restored antique pocket watches and clocks and watches as a kid. So I was around, you know, watches growing up, or horological studies, as you may want to call it, whether it's a cuckoo clock or a grandfather clock with a pendulum and a chain swinging around going cuckoo or whatever it was. So, you know, I was around watches at an early age. I say timing's everything. Obviously, it centers around the time and how many hours and minutes and seconds, and what do you do with those, make the most out of every moment. Yeah. So to me, the watch is a tool for first and foremost. But then obviously after that, it's a design piece and a reflection of your own individual style. I talk about that quite a lot. Yeah. Like the car sort of is it shows what you're into. I think the watch is the same way. You know, whether you're carrying around a pocket watch or you've got a Swatch or a Casio or whatever it may be. You know, we all had a Swatch as a kid. We all had a Casio calculator watch as a kid if you grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming these have probably become trendy.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
joked recently about vintage IKEA. I like furniture. It comes back to design, right? Functional things. Can you use them, sit on them, put things on them? And I'm a big fan of IKEA because form follows function there. And, you know, whether you like IKEA or not, they've done some pretty interesting things.
Yeah.
You know, and I see this trend now of vintage IKEA. IKEA's been around a long time. I love going to flea markets. Whether I'm buying crystals, little trinkets, vintage clothing, whatever it is. To me, inspiration's everyone. There's no better place than a flea market, which is one thing New York doesn't seem to have.
It's tough.
You've got plenty of farmers markets everywhere because when I come to New York, all I do is walk. You know, I took Uber off my phone. I don't have Uber. Yesterday, I walked 20,000 steps, and I just...
Wow.
Last year I averaged over 11,000 steps. This year I'm averaging over 12,000. That's how I'm wearing out the sole of my shoe there. These did over 2,000 miles. But my rambling is like inspiration is all around. I love looking up at buildings and I love going to flea markets. I wish New York had better flea markets. Because there is just, whether you're looking at vintage IKEA that's 25, 30 years old, which was a little bit of a joke, but it's actually become a thing of vintage IKEA.
Collecting vintage IKEA.
Yeah, IKEA is great until you have to, you know, break it down and disassemble it and pull it apart. But if you don't have to do that, it's actually pretty awesome.
All right, well, New York, you heard it.
New York,
Let's get that.
come on.
Let's get
you
that
guys
flea
used to
market
have one on
action going.
7th Ave, I think, you know, back in the, probably 20 years ago in the 20s.
Yeah.
There was a cool flea market there. Right? They got the farmers market down great.
Great farmers markets.
Yeah, people come in from all over, right? But they're not bringing in antiques and stuff like that. I guess the internet has changed that slightly.
Yeah. Well, if you're on this weekend, there's a good flea market just up the road from here that I like poking around through as well. It's, inspiration is everywhere. I'm always surprised by what I'll find, what my son will point out. Hey, isn't that cool? I love that experience and talking to them. You pointed at your shoes. These don't look like just any ordinary Nike sneakers. Tell us about these.
I did a collab with Nike on one of their pro skaters, a Shod Wear, on a 277 inspired SB Dunk. 277's one of my Porsches that I've owned for a long time. It's the one I'm most connected with. It's a 71 911T that's been modified. I've owned it almost 25 years. It's red, white, and blue. Has a number 277 on it. Things for me in life happen organically. I don't have an agent or a manager. All these cool collabs that I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to do have all come organically, and the Nike one was no different. I got an email from Pelly at Nike who said, hey, how do you feel about collaborating on a sneaker with one of our pro skaters? I go, awesome, but I got to let you know I don't skate. He goes, it doesn't matter. Shod's a pro skater. He's a Porsche fan. I think you guys would get along. And it just kind of developed from there.
Yeah. Well, they certainly look. I assume they come in a slightly more new-looking state.
Yeah. Like I say, these ones have averaged, well, they've walked over 2,000 miles. But the shoe is designed to distress like my car. My car's got a lot of patina. And that's what I love about vintage things. Guitars, cars, watches. So my car, I've owned it 25 years. It's got a lot of what I call memorable moments. The car's had a lot of different colors on it. So the shoe was designed to actually distress and get more cracked up with age. So the process really was, my car was originally gold. It'd been painted numerous colors. It's been white for 20 years. So underneath this cracked up white leather was a gold leather. And the process was the paint on top would crack up to reveal the skin underneath, just like the car did, almost like a snake shedding its skin. So that was the goal of the shoe. This was the first time in quite some time Nike had done a canvas and leather dunk. It was the first time they'd actually sort of done something outside of the action sports world, you know, sort of merged into the car world, which was what I brought in. And it proved to be pretty successful, sold out in a few minutes, you know, typical Nike thing. But ultimately, they're super comfy, and it was one of those things that I never thought I would have my own sneaker with Nike. It's like Nike's like sort of as big as you can get in that arena. So just never say never, you know. You never know what opportunities coming around the corner.
Are you a sentimental guy?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sentimental. Yeah.
Like you assign overtime meaning to watches, guitars.
Yeah,
the
for
cars.
example, this car, let me see if I got one in my pocket, because sometimes I carry them around. I got, you know, the freedom about New York is you don't really carry many keys, but this is a collaboration with Hot Wheels that I did. So the car is based around that, the 277, which is my car. Hot Wheels has made this in 9 different variations. The car is actually red, white, and blue. This one's pretty special because there's no white paint on it. So, sentimental, why did I bring that out? Well, I used to have a white one that I literally put in my pocket and traveled around the world. I took photos of it wherever I'd go, Ayers Rock, Sydney Harbour Bridge, Tokyo, and it was in my pocket so much with keys and coins that all the paint wore off it. And it became my good luck charm, like my rabbit's foot. Yeah. And I remember one time I was traveling, I was leaving LA and going through customs, exiting, or actually going through security. I'd taken all the stuff out of my pocket, you put it in the stupid tray, goes through the thing. Yeah. I forgot to pick the car up. And I was at the gate, fishing around in my pocket, and I'm like, where's my 277? So I had to go all the way back to security, and the guy had kept it.
He had it?
He had it.
Wow.
So he gave it back to me, and I got it back. I've literally gone around the world. This is a 99-cent Hot Wheels that you can buy anywhere. And so I've been collaborating with Hot Wheels for the past, I don't know, since 2016, done over 30 of these. And it became like the best business card because everyone has a Hot Wheels story, whether you're 2 years old or 100 years old. I grew up in England, so for me it was Matchbox and Corgi, but it's the same thing, you know. Dreams start at an early age, and dreams begin with someone, you know, vroom, vroom, vrooming this around on the table or whatever it may be. Yeah. So I love giving these out. I have a little deal with Hot Wheels where I get several thousand of each one. I just give them out. It's sort of like the best business card, but in reality it does more than that. It starts a dream at an early age, where someone has something that they're interested in, sentimental about, passionate about. You never know where that dream.
Yeah, you never know where it's going to go. In your TED talk that was quite a few years ago. Now you mentioned writing a letter to Porsche. At an early age, and how that kind of came back around. A little bit of good sentiment there.
True story. You know, I wrote a letter to Porsche when I was 10 in 1977. They wrote a letter back. You know, I said, hey, I want to design cars for you. They essentially wrote a letter back and said, call us when you're older. And I never called them when I was older, but 35 years later, they wrote me another letter when Timur Moscovici's film came out that became the title of that book, Urban Outlaw, which was a 32-minute short documentary film that came out in 2012.
How did that change your life? You were still had Serious Clothing up and running at that point?
No, I'd actually closed Serious Clothing down. My background, I left school at 15, came to America at 19, which was 1986. Lived in LA full-time since 87. The 80s for me was the perfect time. It was sex, drugs, rock and roll. Everything I was into, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, all the American TV shows I watched. You know, I grew up watching a lot of American TV. So my inspiration came from shows like, you know, Chips, Starsky and Hutch, Dukes of Hazzard, you know, watched Evel Knievel, Captain America, and listened to American music. And it was all sort of in LA. So that was like the epicenter of inspiration for me. So that was how I ended up in LA, and I've already forgot your question, sorry. What did you ask me?
What was it? I mean, coming back to like the Porsche letter and like how that came around, and then Urban Outlaw and Serious Clothing that you had.
Yeah, I mean, it was just all organic. Like like as a kid, I could sew. My mum sewed stuff. So for me, sewing was putting patches on my jeans and things like that, making my Levi's as tight as I could get them. So I mean, doesn't everyone do that in the 80s? So, you know, I could sew. And when I first came to LA, like I talked about, it was sex, drugs, rock and roll for a couple of years. And then that novelty sort of wore off a little bit. And then I literally sort of fell into selling secondhand clothing on the boardwalk in Venice. I'd go to yard sales and thrift stores and buy old Levi's for 50 cents on a dollar and buy old Paisley dresses for the same price and patch them up and put them on my jeans. And that was it. It just, my life happens organically by the sense of, like I said, I left school with 2 O levels, so I'm not necessarily book smart, I'm more street smart. And I think you may fall into one of those 2 categories. Highly educated or no education, but sort of where there's a will, there's a way, and a passion, you follow that passion. So for me, things happened organically, but the things I got into, like selling vintage clothing, which led into, you know, reconstruction, I was just passionate about it. I enjoyed doing it. It was a creative thing that I did with my hands. You know, I had an idea and I tried to realize that idea. You know, how do you learn to sew? Well, my mum taught me that. How do you learn design and patterns? Well, find something you really like and just take it apart. There's your pattern, right? Trace that around, cut it out of your favorite material, sew it back together. First one's not great, but by the time you've done 2, 3, 5, 10, you kind of got a better idea and fine-tune. And for me, it was a little bit of success on my own. You know, I talk about this all the time. I hate the idea of someone saying, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I had no idea. Or cut your hair, get a real job. I've had long hair for 45 years. I've never had a real job. I've always done things that I've been passionate about that I really had no education in, but it was this inspiring thing to motivate me to get out of bed, to learn how to figure out how to make this thing work, whatever it may be. And it's trial and error along the way, of course. You put your hand up, you ask for help. You know, and the great thing about LA, really, compared to coming from Sheffield, is whatever you want to do, there's an opportunity and an infrastructure to do it out there, whatever it is, within a 50-mile radius. So it was just like a very creative time. Venice Beach was a very inspiring place, and it still is to this day. So that was the environment, you know, and that just sort of one thing led to another.
How did watches fit into this scene in this stage of your life?
They didn't really, you know, I mean, my dad, like I say, had a little business restoring clocks and watches. So there were always like things around the house that were taken apart and not always put back together, and bits and pieces that were lost that nobody touched and nobody moved, but things disappear. So it was always in the background. My cousin lives in Switzerland. He was always collecting things. You know, the Swiss, as you know, they make watches.
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't even know if I had a watch when I first came out here.
Like, what was the first watch that you saw that you remember, like, that made an impression on you?
Well, I have to say it was my Uncle David who collected Rolexes.
Okay.
And I've never owned a Rolex.
Sure.
And I don't want to own one.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the first, like, my Uncle David was a graphic designer. So I was working class, my dad was a salesman. My Uncle David was a cool uncle who had the cool cars.
So a Rolex was a watch that made an impression on you as like, oh, this is kind of like the cool guy thing in this era.
Yeah, but it didn't make me want one.
Yeah.
You know, I'm back to the thinking man's Rolex, the Omega. I do remember getting a Swatch as a kid, and I do remember getting a Casio watch with the calculator on it.
Ah,
you know, the black one
Classic,
with the little buttons on it.
Yeah.
And this is like early 80s.
Yeah.
And I remember getting that. So I didn't really collect watches as a kid. That came a little bit later.
A little bit later.
You know, there's some memorable moments. Buying my first Porsche when I was 25 was a memorable moment because that represented a dream come true.
Sure.
That was over 30 years ago.
Is it a slant nose?
Yeah, 74 slant nose, white bodied conversion. Buying my first proper watch was an Omega Speedmaster. Was also sort of like a memorable moment because it was something like an iconic, you know, it wasn't a low-end Swatch or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I still think they're cool. Ironically, I went into the Swatch store yesterday. Of course, I'm looking at the Swatch Omega collab. Of course, they don't have it, you know, but it's still cool, and you still kind of want one.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Swatch to me is a bit like IKEA in the sense of, I always say everyone's got a piece of IKEA furniture, and everyone's probably had a Swatch. Yeah. So to me, it's obtainable. I like things that are obtainable. Like when I bought my first Omega, they were obtainable. Then I was collecting Hoyas. They were still obtainable because they hadn't sort of become really cool at this point. Yeah, Steve McQueen, Monaco film, I get it. But yeah, Hoya was sort of under the radar 10 years ago a little bit. Yeah. Or at least to the masses from a collectability point of view.
Absolutely.
And I'm back to affordable. You know, I don't want to ever own anything expensive. I would sooner put that same amount of money and spread it into as many things as I can get for that same amount of money.
As many experiences as possible.
Yeah, I
right?
don't want one expensive watch if I can get 20 watches that do the same thing, and then I have the variety, right?
Yeah.
And I'll wear them all up my arm at the same time.
So how did the Porsche Design Chronograph 1 connection come along?
You know, it's, yet again, I liked collecting the first of certain things. So when it comes to Porsche, it was, you know, for me, 64 911, early 75 turbo. You know, the first chronograph from 72, the PVD. You know, that was an iconic watch for many, many reasons. So I just had to have an early one, you know, pre-IWC. It was an Orfina movement. You know, the first one didn't say Orfina on it, or it did. My memory sort of collapsed a little bit, but I like the beginning of things because to me it's the purest thing. It might not necessarily be the best, but it's how it started. So I'm always more about the beginning. You know, like some people say, why do you have a 78 928 when a 95 928 GTS is better? I go, yeah, but maybe better, but it's not the first one. That's the last one. I'm all about the first one.
All about the first one.
Yeah, so Porsche Design watch, had to have one. I got one I found one that was mint, and a year later it was no longer mint because I'd worn it all the time when I was playing around with cars and dinging it and chipping it and stuff like that. And it didn't matter. The more beat up it became, the more I liked it. You know, and the other day I actually went in Tag Heuer store on Fifth Avenue. I go on these long walks. So suddenly we walked all the way up, you know, the Guggenheim and all the way back down. I've got to stop in a watch stop along the way. And they were telling me about they've got a new coating that's no longer the PVD because it doesn't fade. I go, but that's what I loved about it. I loved when it faded around the edges and corners.
Yeah.
Nothing needs to be perfect for me. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't chase perfection. Yeah. You know, you want to do the best you can, but nothing ever needs to be perfect for me. So when someone makes a watch that doesn't ding up, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want it to look the same all the time.
Yeah.
I want things to sort of de-stress naturally for the most part.
Is it unhealthy that a lot of these things have been pushed into like a luxury realm now? Both cars and watches, you know, I think you get a lot of speculators coming in and they treat it with, you know, kid gloves and it goes into a safe and it's like, oh, but they're collecting it.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my pet peeves. You know, I joke about that scenario of, I talk about when it comes to Porsche, it's a pie and there's a lot of slices. There's a slice for people that do what I do, people that race. There's a slice for people that love to put the car on a golf course and have someone with white gloves and Q-tips tell them what's right and wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I've sort of joked about that for a long time, and then it came full circle for me because a month ago, I was a judge at the Amelia Island Concours, which is the #2 Concours in the country, on the golf course. But I'm not wearing the outfit, I don't have the white gloves, I don't have the Q-tips, and you know, I'm not really pointing out that you've got the wrong shade of cat.
You still haven't gotten a haircut.
Still haven't got a haircut. Yeah. So to me, you know, I'm not a big fan of people that don't use things. Yeah. I talk about a car is built to be driven, right? Watch is built to tell time. So from the car point of view, if you're not driving it, you know, it's an appliance. Yeah. And I'm interested in stories and memorable miles. I was just down in Florida doing this Amelia Island thing. I drove Mark Probonic's 1958 Pre-A 356 Coupe, of which he's put over 350,000 miles on it. Yeah. And he's driven 44 of the 48 continental states in that car. Wow. And it's got dings and cracks and all this stuff. And it's antiquated and it's a bit of a challenge to drive, but it's rewarding. Someone that's going to show me, hey, check out this car with 50 miles on it. I have no interest in it because no one's ever going to drive it. Yeah. And if you do, there's going to be a lot of things wrong with it. Yeah. You know, things have seized, cracked, hoses break. Yeah. Sort of watches are a little bit of the same. In a way, I'm mellowing slightly because I ran into an old buddy the other night who I hadn't seen in a long time, and he collects guitars, but he doesn't play guitars. So my first thing is like, why do you collect if you don't play? But then I sort of realized it doesn't really matter. But yeah, he has 100 guitars in case. So I go, well, how often do you get them out? He goes, well, I rotate them. So I respect that. You know, it's not necessarily my thing not to use an item. Like I collect guitars as well. I actually recently just broke an SG, ironically, that I'd bought in Brooklyn at a guitar shop for next to nothing not too long ago. I'd managed to get it back to LA a couple of years ago without a case. And then I was moving out of a loft into somewhere else. And I put it down on a guitar stand next to a van with like 8 other guitars. And then I opened the door to the van and knocked a crappy acoustic guitar, which was just propped up on the door, into this SG, which I really liked. And of course, it fell over and cracked the headstock. I go, well, it's kind of annoying, but it's not the end of the world. Yeah. So these items, shit happens to them, right? Yeah. But ultimately, things, for me personally, they need to be worn. You know, that watch is already dinged up and stuff, and they just need to be worn. I'm not going to say to someone, hey, you can't put that watch away and speculate on it, right? You can do whatever you want with your own stuff, because I do that. Yeah. But it's not something necessarily that I'm into. Like in the Porsche world, my pet peeve are these guys that have to have the best of the best, which they assume is a new GT3 RS, which they can't have a plain white one. They got to get paint to sample to match whatever. And then they don't want to drive it because they don't want to devalue it. Yeah. To me, the value is in the miles, the memories, the shared moments, the journeys, the people. Yeah. If you're not driving it, you're not creating any of that. And my sort of pet peeve question, I have a lot of people email me things or ask me, hey, getting into Porsche, what's the best first-time Porsche from an investment point of view? I go, you're asking the wrong person. I don't care. Unless you're investing in memorable moments and smiles per mile, I can't really tell you anything. Yeah. You know, I bought things that were $5 that then became worth $50 because they doubled and tripled and doubled again. But that's not why I bought it. I was just ahead of that trend, and then later on that trend of short wheelbase cars, early turbos, whatever it is, became popular.
Yeah.
But when I was into them, no one cared about them. Because they wanted the latest, greatest, shiny thing that was more modern. And the great thing about Porsche is, for the first 30 years of 911, everything's interchangeable. I mean, you could take a 64 911, which is a holy grail car. They only made 232 of them.
Yeah.
You could pull out that 2-liter motor and put a 3.8-liter motor in it, and it bolts up to the same 4 bolts. Obviously, you've got to modify a few other things, but if you wanted to do that, you could do it. And that is and was what was great about early 911s.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it hard for the purists that want the numbers matching all original. And I've got a few of those, but I don't actually chase that originality. To me, I chase drivability and how do you feel when you're behind the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of these things are what we make of them.
Yeah.
I know people can position them as this or that, but if you're using them for this or that, then that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of high mileage Porsches. You know, I've got a 996 GT2, which 20 years ago was like the holy grail of everything Porsche made. You couldn't get anything bigger, faster, more expensive. And I bought one with almost 90,000 miles on it. I'm the third owner, lifelong LA car. I had a couple of buddies that had the same car with 20,000 miles that was worth more money financially, but they didn't drive any different. You know, up to a certain point, 250,000 miles, sometimes a car with more miles on it drives better with one with less miles on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you've sort of dialed out all the squeaks and rattles and everything's, you know, the fluids need to move around the vehicle. It's like your blood needs to move around your system, right? Cars are the same way. I believe watches are the same way. You know, if you don't wind them and, you know, things dry up right and then things don't actually spin and turn and springs don't return and whatever it is that happens inside that case.
Yeah. But brands today are still delivering the same experiences that they were back then. I saw you recently driving the 992 GT3 RS. Is that delivering like the experience that you're looking for? You know, compared to some of the, you know, what would it have been like in 76 getting a 3-liter turbo and taking that out for a blast, you know?
In a way, yes, because the 3-liter turbo in 76 was, you know, one of the fastest things on the road, unless you had a Lamborghini Countach or a 512 Boxer. That was it, so that was the pinnacle. GT3 RS it's the pinnacle on one hand. On the other hand, it's way too much of a track car for the street. It's a track-focused car where there's no race series for it. You know, it's floating around in this strange world where, if I'm honest, 90% of the people that are going to buy it aren't going to drive it because they're going to drive it to Cars and Coffee because they don't want to put miles on it and devalue it. Or they're not really going to track it because of the same reason. So Porsche makes things because they can. The GT3 RS, in a way, has maxed out the technology, in my mind, of the 4-liter naturally aspirated motor. Because it has no more power than the GT3 did prior, the 991, in 2018. So that technology is, the model is now 7 years old at least. Porsche's sort of maxed out the power they can get out of that 4-liter non-turbo engine due to emissions, probably. And as everything's going electrification, they make that car faster by adding more downforce, better aero, a DRS system, a big wing that makes 2,000 pounds of downforce. But unless you're doing triple-digit speed, which you're never going to do anywhere where we are today, right? Completely useless. And then on these messed up city roads where it's so low with all these diffusers and under trays, you know, you're going to be chipping the front spoiler all the time. The big wing's in your way. You're not doing triple-digit speed, so it's not making the downforce. So it's kind of like mildly irrelevant. But everyone wants one. And they'll all pay like, you know, 100 grand over premium to get one because it's the coolest thing that everyone has to.
It looks the business, but in terms of like the cars that's going to give you the experiences that you want to have, you don't need the greatest, the most expensive.
No, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people out of GT3s that are normally first-time Porsche owners that think they need that. I go, why do you need it? Are you going to track it? No, well, you'd probably be just as good with the C2S, one step above base model, which in everyday worldwide situations will be easy to drive, will be equally as fast. You know, it won't be as fast around the Nürburgring, but you're not going there anyway. So what are the bragging rights? It doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I've talked people off the GT3 RS ledge or GT3 ledge because you can't even get them. You know, there's not enough being made. Everyone wants one. You can't get a dealer allocation. If you can, you're going to pay through the nose.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's too much of a thing. Is people kind of getting into these spaces for the status element of it, of the I have these, I can get this rare stuff, I can get, instead of I buy it because I'm using it for this and I enjoy it for
Ran
that.
into a guy on the street in New York on my Sunday walk the other day on Madison Avenue. And he goes, "You're that Porsche guy, right?" I go, "Yeah, you just seen the GT3RS review. He's getting one."
Yeah.
I said to him, "Why are you getting one?" His answer was great. "Because I know the dealer." It wasn't like, "because I really want one."
Yeah.
His first reply was, "because I know the dealer."
Yeah.
Well, good for him.
Good for him. Yeah.
He didn't say, "I really want one."
Yeah.
He said, "I know the dealer."
Yeah. Yeah. So are there any other car brands or even watch brands that you are paying attention to nowadays that are kind of newer into the space that you feel like there's something here that people should be paying attention to or that people are missing?
I'm a sucker for that Omega, Swatch Omega.
The Swatch Omega.
Yeah, it's high and low. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the high and low. I know you either love that or you hate it, right? It's a polarizing thing.
Yeah.
But I was looking at one yesterday and they're affordable, right?
Yeah.
If you can get one. I mean, there's plenty of people doing cool stuff out there, but I'm not on every watch blog. I'm not, really looking up into it. I'm vintage all the way. I mean, I've got a few Tag Heuers. I don't really wear them. They're too big. They're a little heavy. I like a smaller bezel, something that doesn't... I don't wear jewelry.
Yeah.
So for me, for a lot of people, I see a watch as an item of jewelry.
Yeah.
And I don't wear jewelry. I got no rings, no bracelets, no nothing. So I'm not into these big, oversized, clunky things, that look like something that came off of Captain Nemo's Nautilus submarine or whatever it is.
Yeah.
In a way, I'm weirdly a little more understated when it comes to things like that.
Interesting. It has to be practical, fit into your life practically.
Yeah, and like watches are something I'm into, and a lot of people have approached me to do watch collaborations, and people have offered to give me watches. I just turn it down, whatever it is. I turned one down a month ago. Someone wanted to give me a watch. It was small production line, bespoke manufacturer, interesting sort of little interchangeable bezel thing, but I didn't like it. So it was like, I'm never going to wear this. Appreciate your opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you, but no thanks. And it was kind of mildly offended that I didn't want to take it. I go, well, I kind of feel like I'm doing you a favor by not taking it because I'm not going to wear it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I don't want it sat in the corner gathering dust.
Yeah.
I have my own watches where, are gathering dust that I forget to rotate.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that really answers your question.
It's just
I don't wear jewelry. I don't necessarily like big, ostentatious, diamond-encrusted things.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love the kind of practical element of this. So the practical meets the aesthetic element, I think, is important for us. So people looking to come into these spaces, the automotive space, younger enthusiasts looking to kind of find their own lane that they can stay in. Not paying attention to too much to the blog or to the YouTuber that they like or anything like that. How can they find their own, kind of start building their own style, their own taste?
Pretty easy. Open your eyes. That's the first thing, right? Just look up, look around, walk around. What attracts your interest? What makes you turn your head and do a double take? Right? What gets your juices rolling? Is that Saab 99 in bright orange that's around the corner from here? Or the Volvo station wagon that you see in the car park at IKEA? Or, the old Impala? To me, I always tell people just open your eyes. Inspiration's all around. Yeah. What interests you, right? Because that'll be ultimately something you'll be in, as opposed to you acquired something because it was trendy. Yeah. And then trends, like I said earlier, go out of style. Great design never goes out of style. It might not be in vogue and in fashion, but that's a continuous thing. Yeah. So, but ultimately find what appeals to you, and hopefully that's something that's obtainable, that's affordable, that is going to be usable, that's not too precious where you don't want to use it. If it's a car, something that's not too precious that you don't mind parking it on the street. There's still nothing that precious that, anything can be fixed or lived with.
Yeah.
Some of them I fixed. The 928 still got the ding on the front bumper where someone backed into it. So now there's another memory to it.
It's all.
But my advice is, just acquire what you like, whether it's guitars, cars, surfboards, skateboards, whatever.
So long as if somebody asks you why you got that, You have a better answer than what my
Yeah.
AD told me that he had one.
I got it because I loved it and I always wanted it.
Yeah,
As opposed to I knew the broker.
Yeah. Well, Magnus, really appreciate your time today.
This has been short, real short.
Is there anything you can tell, like what projects are you working on now? What should people be paying attention to? Where can people find more of you?
Well, I'm around. I'm on that thing called Instagram. I'm doing this thing I'm really excited about called OPP. It's
OPP.
Other People's Porsches.
Okay, I love
I'm down with OPP. So yeah, basically.
What is that? What's OPP? How did this come about?
OPP is Other People's Porsches. Up to this point, I've sort of made a lot of films on my own cars.
Yeah.
But I've been fortunate enough to drive OPP, Other People's Porsches.
Yeah.
You know, the Porsche world, the car world, the like-minded enthusiast. You know, it's no different to any other world. You all come together to share passions for things that you're, excited about. So I've been fortunate enough to drive other people's Porsches all over the world on cars that I can't afford to own, Carrera GTs and 918s and 959s. And I always say, you don't have to own the car to experience the car.
Yeah.
And I talked about doing this show for some time, Other People's Porsches. It's this catchy sort of phrase, OPP. So finally, I'm just shooting them real lo-fi. You know, I've shot 10 of them. I put 5 of them out. It's me driving other people's Porsches, experiences, memorable moments. Trying to do them when I travel in different cities.
Yeah.
And just share stories of passionate, like-minded fellow Porsche owners and enthusiasts as to what makes them tick. Why did they buy this car? Why did they build this car? What do they like about this car? How does it drive? You know, I keep talking about no two are ever the same. So for me, it's just doing cool shit with cool people. So I'm super excited about that. When I'm excited about a project, I'm sort of deep diving into it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about OPP. Check it out.
No, sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
On my YouTube channel.
Others People's Porsches.
Yeah.
On
Like
YouTube, on the Instagram. Magnus Walker, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit with us today. Really appreciate it.
Timing's everything. That was short and sweet.